Hi, everyone. It's me, Krylios, Team Racing Productions MC and producer. And joining me today is Zach Ammerman. Welcome.
Hi there.
Hello, Zach. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Awesome. I'm doing great. I'm
Good.
doing great. Well, I want to kick this off with just having you introduce yourself to our audience and letting us know a little bit about you, your experience, background, all that.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Zach. I make maps. That's my. It started out as a side gig, and it's soon, hopefully, if fingers crossed, going to be transitioning over into my main gig soon. And I make maps about mainly the DC area, but not exclusively. The vast majority, though, are about the DC area. So I just finished late last year a map of every single square inch of DC. I have a map of every single building in DC. That I did, and neighborhood by neighborhood, I kind of like pieced them all together and puzzled them. And I'll show, I think I have some screenshots of that to share with you. And then I
do
also
as well. I'm going to share them on
Yeah.
the screen as we go along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've got I've also do like lots of like science parks maps, nature maps, things that inspire me, nature and science and parks and things I liked. I made into maps, and they're mainly about the DC area, but not exclusively. So
certainly.
Yeah.
Well, tell me this. When did you realize that you had a love for maps and cartography and seeing the visual way of how our places and spaces come together? And when did you find that love?
Since I was a little kid, I have always been a huge map nerd. Yeah, those are some of my more recent ones.
That. You know, I used to read the Atlas. I would just read the Atlas for fun and just
Me too. I had, as a little kid, I think 8 huge atlases that I would spend hours studying as a little kid. I was a huge nerd. I won the geography bee in middle school. I'm a humongous nerd.
That. Wow.
Wow. I've always loved maps. And then in my professional life, I worked for a few years as a newspaper designer. And so after that, I moved to DC about 8 years ago, and I started making maps just to keep, and here's some more of them. That's the overall map of DC that I was talking about earlier, and some of the examples of the neighborhoods. I have every neighborhood in DC, basically. But anyway, so I started combining my love of design and maps. I started making maps in my spare time just for fun. And I started posting them on Instagram, and people were like, you should sell these are good. So like 3 years ago now, I think I started selling them. I set up a little Etsy shop, and it was really small to begin with, but it's picked up quite a bit of steam recently. And so I have over 165 different maps. That's a zoomed in version of the overall neighborhood map to show that I've got like every single building in DC. I mean, I might have missed one or two, but it's theoretically has every building in DC.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing, trying to transition over to do that full time. Hopefully we'll see if it works. I don't know. Fingers crossed. A little scared.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, fabulous. I actually want to talk about the DC Neighborhoods project, because this is really, really ambitious. You hope to capture, and we're hoping that's what happened. Every single neighborhood in DC, as well as the individual buildings. That is really ambitious. Seems almost like that's a lot of time to do that. So tell me what the process was like getting this together.
So basically the way it works is so DC has really good public data on building footprints. So I would take that and have that open on one screen, and then on the other screen, I just drew all the buildings. So I'm not using like automation or anything. I actually draw all of the buildings. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is DC doesn't have, and I figured this out really quickly, DC does not have official neighborhood boundaries at all. It's very unofficial.
I was going to ask you about that next. I really was, because when I moved to DC from Jamaica for college, and I was at Howard, no one could agree on what neighborhood Howard was in.
Sure.
They would call it the Howard area, but some said it was Shaw, some said it was LaDroit, some said it was Mount Vernon. No one could really give me a which neighborhood it is in. And then I realized on who you asked. Exactly. The boundaries were free moving. That's what I learned. Yeah.
For sure. So that was the hardest part of this project, is figuring out where to draw the boundaries. So I would use a combination of, I would look at what Google Maps does, Apple Maps. I would look at Wikipedia. I would look at what I would find, like what the civic association was called for that area. And I had to do, for some areas were easier than others because they have more seemingly agreed upon boundaries. And then others are like a little bit like iffy. So I had to make a judgment call on every single map. So it's possible for me to have pleased everyone. And occasionally I get some people that are like, that's not where the boundary is supposed to be. But for the most part, people seem to appreciate it. But
Yeah,
so that was definitely the hardest part, is trying to figure out where to draw the line. And
that part seems really, really really difficult. All right, so it's spring. I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about the cherry blossom maps.
Yeah, so the one on the left there is a map of all of, and I got that from the National Park Service data. They have really good data on this.
Yeah.
And it's all of the different types of cherry blossoms that are at the tidal basin and down all the way to Haynes Point on East Potomac Park. The vast majority are Yoshino cherries. Those are the ones that were just in bloom just now. But there's also some other varieties that are lesser known that bloom at different times or have different sorts of flowers and stuff. And so this is sort of your guide to where to find all of the different sorts of cherry blossoms around the tidal basin and everything. Yeah,
this is a great reference. My goodness.
Yeah. Yes. So my partner is a huge tree nerd. So he works at a nursery like for plants. Yeah. And he's a huge tree nerd. So I've done several like tree related things kind of for him. So this was one of them that I've done. And then the one on the right is just one that I spent, because I made all these pretty illustrations on the left one.
Yeah.
Of the different blooms. I thought I had a half of an idea in the back of my head. I could maybe turn this into a map of all of DC. And so I just kind of played with it and did it. And that's the one on the right is the result of that. I just kind of mashed them all together, and I thought it looked really well. So it looked really good. So there we go.
Certainly. Well, talk to me about your love affair with DC. You know, someone who's going to spend the amount of time to create these maps, get very intricate with it, really trying to capture this, and not only but for future generations, must have a certain love affair with the city that they're doing that. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I've lived here. I'm a transplant. I've lived here about 8 years, but I love DC. It's my home. It's where I plan on being at least for a very long time. I have no idea what will happen far off in the future, but I don't have any plans on moving anytime soon. I love DC. I think it's a great place to live. And so this was kind of my sort of love letter to DC, the city where I live. And it's also, I'm a huge, sorry, my dog might come into the frame. I'm trying to keep her out of it. But so I have I probably should have gone into urban planning earlier in my life. And so this is kind of like a combination of my love of design, urban planning, and just sort of a love note to DC.
Love that. And let's talk about some of the other things you produce and just touch on them a few bit, because I like the ones here. So if you could talk about the ones on the screen, actually.
Yeah, so the one on the left is one of my more recent maps. It's a map of all of the bookstores and libraries and anything having to do with books in DC. And if you look closely, that map is actually made entirely of words.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so all of everything on it is made of words, every single thing. So like instead of actually drawing the Potomac, I just have the word Potomac written.
Yeah,
I don't know how many numbers of times, hundreds of times. And then it's mapped all the books. I'm a huge book. I love books. I'm a book nerd. I have thousands of books in my apartment.
That. Speaking of which, you know, just recently I had the unfortunate displeasure of meeting someone, and we were trying to set something up, and I suggested, maybe get a book and put that on top. Yeah. And he said to me, I don't own books.
No, that's never a good sign.
I couldn't even believe what was going on. I was
that's not a good sign. Yeah, you know, there's that John Waters quote. I don't know if you know it. He's the director. He said, if you go home to someone's house and they don't have any books, he said, don't. F them.
Keep it G-rated. Very bad. So this is why this is so even important to me, and doing it in words, you know, the power of the written word, really encapsulating everything there. How do you come up with the ideas, the creative ways in how to present these maps? Like, do you just sleep on it, or what happens?
Well, basically, yeah. I often have, like I mentioned before, I kind of like a half of an idea in the back of my head. Yeah. And I just kind of see if I can make it work. And like the DC Books map, I was out with I hike a lot with my partner. We were out hiking one day. I was telling him I wanted to do a book map. Yeah. It just kind of, the idea just came to me. Why don't I make it with words? Like, I don't know. We were just talking, and sometimes just talking about it, an idea just springs in my head, and then I try to make it work. And sometimes it doesn't work. But this time it did. Yeah. And then I've got also, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to talk about the other maps. So this other one here in the middle is the map of the tree canopy of DC, which is it's not a map of every tree in DC, which I'd like to maybe potentially do one time. It's a map of the canopy of DC, which is where the ground is completely covered by leaves and trees. Yeah.
So I don't forestry, woodland type thing.
Exactly. So there are obviously trees in the part where it's not, whether it's not green, but what it's mapping is where they're actually thick trees. Yeah. So again, my partner is a tree nerd, so it's kind of tree. Anyway,
yeah.
And then the other ones, I think watersheds are super interesting. So I've done one of the Anacostia, of the Potomac, and also of Rock Creek, and a couple other ones. And then
and it's always great when you look at watershed maps and like watershed things to see how the water shapes where people live, how people live, the resources that are available in certain places and not.
100%.
Yes, that's so great to see always.
Yeah, the nature shapes human geography in so many ways, and I think that's watersheds are super interesting. It also, I like doing these because it connects you. You don't realize it when you're living like way far up the Anacostia or somewhere, but you are connected to the ocean actually. So I think that's an interesting thing. It connects you to nature. And then the last map on the right is one of my favorite maps. It's the map of the Arboretum, which is one of my favorite places in DC. And that's just to demonstrate that I have lots of parks maps too. It's not just science, nature, and neighborhood maps. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, what can people look forward to coming from you in the future? Give us a tease.
So right now I'm working on doing the same thing I did for DC for Alexandria.
Wow. Okay, good.
Slowly,
that's a lost part of DC, a former.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's exactly my goal, is to try to reform the triangle.
I love that.
I'm going to do a map with all of it. That's a long-term goal, but this is my dog Flora. She's joining in. But so that's what I'm working on right now, is doing Alexandria, which is a little bit harder because I'm not as familiar with Alexandria.
Yeah.
And it, like DC, doesn't have official neighborhoods. So it's a little bit, I've had to kind of crowdsource the neighborhood boundaries on that on Twitter and stuff. So I'm working on that right now. I'm also long-term goal planning to do other cities that I love, like maybe Chicago or Montreal, or I don't know. I've got a couple in mind, but that's longer, farther off. And then I've just got a couple other maps I have, kind of, like I said, like kind of half an idea in the back of my head that I might do soon too, but I don't want to talk about those because I haven't decided if they'll work or not yet.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Zach, thank you for being here with me, and thank you for the work you do. Before I let you go, of course, how can people learn more about you, learn more about Wild Places Prints, keep up with what you are doing, and support or donate in any way?
Yeah, so those are the links. That's my link to my Etsy shop, my Instagram, and my Twitter account, which is my Twitter account's also my personal Twitter account. So if you don't want like my personal political views, don't follow me on there. It's a mix of maps and my other stuff. But the Instagram thing is just my maps, and that's my Etsy shop. And I also just started a new website, which is just wildplacesprints.com. I just launched it. It's got all my maps on there. So yes, that's how you can follow me and keep up to date.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach, for being here.
Thank you.
With me, it was certainly a pleasure. I was actually first aware of you because I saw the neighborhoods map and I was like, oh my God. And that was actually the first map I ever saw with boundaries of the neighborhood. So it was very interesting to hear you say that officially there aren't none. So this could be the first thing that could have probably ever set it up. Maps are what really create the boundaries. They're not there. All of it is political, So someone made the decision of what it was. And you have the honor of doing that. So it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best of luck in your continued career. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
All righty. Now, to everyone watching, please follow me, Krylios, at It's Krylios on Twitter and Instagram, as well as follow Team Racine Productions at Team Racine on all forms of social media. Like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to visit the website in the link in the description for more information. So thank you so much, but most of all, thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.